There is a kind of betrayal that arrives loudly. A slammed door, a screenshot, a hotel receipt, a lipstick stain on the wrong collar. And then there is the quieter kind. The kind that sits across from you at dinner, asks if you want sparkling or still, and lets you keep building a future on top of a floor it already knows is unstable. I used to think the loud kind would be the one that ended me. I thought if someone ever broke my trust, I would know it immediately. I would stand up, I would leave, I would not need a second opinion. What I did not understand was how much confusion can survive inside a very tidy life. My name is Mara. I was 28 when I ended an engagement that looked beautiful from the outside, and somehow the hardest part was not ending it. The hardest part was refusing to narrate it politely. Julian and I had been together for almost 4 years, engaged for 11 months. By the time we were picking linen samples, we had become one of those couples other people trust on sight. We were efficient together. We remembered birthdays. We brought the right bottle of wine. We did not fight in public. We had matching savings goals, or so I believed. That is one of the cruelest details about deception. It borrows the shape of competence. Nothing about him looked reckless. He was good with handshakes, good with mothers, good at saying things like, "I just want us to be solid," in a voice that made older relatives nod like they had personally inspected his character. My parents loved him. His parents loved me. Our friends had already moved us into the category of inevitable. There were gifts stored in my mother's hall closet, a mixer from my aunt, a set of champagne flutes from my cousin, a handwritten card from Julian's grandmother that said, "May honesty be the roof over your home." I think about that line a lot now, not because it saved me, because I missed the warning. The first crack in the version of him I carried was small enough to ignore. A missed payment he brushed off, a story about an old relationship that changed slightly depending on who was in the room, a charge on a card he explained too quickly, a private tension around money that never lasted long enough for me to name it. Whenever I pressed, he had an answer ready. Not always a great one, just a fast one. And speed has its own persuasive power. If someone can answer before your discomfort fully forms, you start doubting whether it needed to exist. I was not naive. At least I do not think I was. I had lived alone, handled my own bills, helped my younger brother through a divorce, messy enough to make him suspicious for years. I knew grown adults could lie beautifully. I just did not think I was being asked to love one. The reveal did not come in one dramatic package. No single envelope. No confession under rain. No shaking voice that said, "There's something I need to tell you." It came in fragments. A credit notice mailed to our apartment with a red banner across the top. A lender I did not recognize. A balance too large to belong to a forgetful errand. When I asked about it, Julian smiled first. That should have told me everything. He smiled the way people smile when they are buying a few seconds for the right version of events. He said it was old, complicated, already handled. He said the letter looked scarier than it was. He said the timing was unfortunate, which is a phrase I have since learned usually means, "I am not sorry it happened. I am sorry you saw it. I wanted to believe him." That embarrassed me later, but it was true. I wanted to believe him because we were 6 weeks away from mailing the invitations, because my mother had already altered her dress, because his sister had booked a flight, because once a future gets expensive, every instinct in you tries to protect it from facts. But then more facts arrived. Not one debt, several, not one omission. A pattern. Money borrowed from a friend and forgotten. A lease dispute he had described as his landlord being difficult, when in reality he had been late for months. A story about an ex who had become unstable that looked very different when I found old messages showing he had been seeing someone else at the same time. I am careful with that detail now. Not because I owe him tenderness. Because I learned pain gets clearer when you stop decorating it. He did not lie about everything. That would have been easier. He lied selectively. Strategically. In places where the truth would have changed my consent. That is what split the floor open for me. Not simply that he had debt. People have debt. Not simply that his past was messy. Many pasts are. It was the architecture of concealment, the way information had been sorted according to what I was allowed to decide. Julian came home the night I finally laid it all out, with the tired confidence of someone expecting to manage another conversation. I had placed 3 envelopes on the table. My laptop was open, the old messages were on the screen. There was no dinner cooking, no music, just evidence, and the silence that evidence makes. He stopped in the doorway, looked at the table, and I watched the exact second he understood charm would not be enough. For a moment I thought I might see remorse. Something true. Fear? Maybe. Even panic. What I saw instead was calculation looking for a better costume. He sat down slowly, rubbed both hands over his face, said, "Okay, before you spiral, let me explain. Before you spiral." I remember that phrase with humiliating precision. As if my problem was not the hidden debts, not the recycled lies, not the edited history, but the risk that I might respond with an inconvenient amount of feeling. His explanation lasted nearly an hour. It moved constantly. That is how dishonest explanations survive. They do not stay still long enough to be pinned down. He was protecting me from stress. He was ashamed. He planned to tell me after the wedding he knew I would overthink it. His ex was manipulative. The debt sounded worse on paper. It was never technically cheating. He did not want his family to judge him. He did not want my family to panic. He did not want a temporary problem to destroy something permanent. Every sentence had a small life raft in it. Not enough to carry truth. Just enough to float blame away from him. When he was done, he looked up as if I should recognize how hard honesty had been for him. I asked one question. If the letters had never come here, when exactly were you planning to tell me? He did not answer. Not really. He circled. He sighed. He said timing matters. He said pressure had made everything worse. He said I was reducing him to the worst chapter of his life. That was when something in me went still. Not loud. Not triumphant. Just still. There are moments when the body quietly stops negotiating before the mouth has caught up. I said, I can't marry someone who thinks my right to know is a scheduling preference. His face changed then. Not grief, not even anger at first. Offense. As if I had violated the agreed tone of a problem he had hoped to curate. He told me I was being extreme. He said everyone has secrets. He said relationships require grace. He asked if I was really going to throw away what we built over things he was already trying to fix. Throw away. Another phrase I remember. As if trust were a glass I had dropped. Not a structure he had been sawing at for months. I did not scream. I wish I could tell you I delivered a speech sharp enough to divide the room in two. But the truth is, clarity rarely sounds cinematic. I said, you did not give me the marriage I thought I was agreeing to. You gave me a performance. And then I took my ring off, set it on the table, and watched us become history in the most ordinary light imaginable. The breakup itself was terrible, but comprehensible. People lie. Engagements end. Families call. Friends choose careful language. Florists keep deposits. Tailors apologize. Mothers cry while pretending not to. Pain with logistics around it can at least be organized. What disoriented me was what came next. For 2 days, Julian alternated between pleading and image management. He called. Texted. Wrote long messages about fear. About pressure. About not wanting to lose me because of mistakes he was willing to correct. I did not respond much. I was too busy making lists. Vendor calls. Refund emails. Who to tell first? How much to say? Which version of events counted as private dignity, and which version counted as helping a liar retire gracefully? On the 3rd evening, he asked if we could meet in person. Public place, no scene, just one conversation. I agreed because I still had keys to return, and because some part of me believed adults should close doors in complete sentences. We met at a cafe near the river. It was late enough that the dinner crowd had thinned. The lights were low. The barista was wiping down the pastry case. The kind of setting where people speak softly by default, which turned out to be exactly what he wanted. Julian looked wrecked enough to invite sympathy. That used to work on me. He had chosen a pale shirt. No tie, no watch, as if stripping away polish might make him look more sincere. For the first 10 minutes, he said all the expected things. He was sorry. He had panicked. He had been stupid. He should have told me sooner. He understood if I could not come back. I listened. I even believed that some of it was real. That is another difficult truth. People can feel genuine regret and still remain committed to self-protection. Those things do not cancel each other out. They often travel together. Then he leaned forward and lowered his voice, like he was finally arriving at the delicate, responsible request he had saved for the end. He said, "Whatever happens, can we please be aligned on what we tell people?" I remember blinking. Not because I did not hear him, because I had, and my mind wanted one extra second in a world where I hadn't. He kept going. He said both families were already upset. He said his mother was asking questions. My father was probably furious. Friends would gossip. People always fill gaps with the worst version. Wouldn't it be kinder, he asked, to say we just grew apart? Just grew apart. He offered the phrase like a pressed shirt, like something neat I could put on for the sake of the occasion. He said it was not a lie, exactly. We had grown apart. The stress had changed things. The pressure had exposed incompatibilities. Why drag private details into a public ending? Why turn pain into a scandal? Why invite judgment? The truly astonishing thing about being manipulated by someone smart is how often the request arrives dressed as maturity. He was not saying, "Protect me because I deserve it." He was saying, "Protect me because decent people know when to be gracious." I asked, "Do you mean gracious or useful?" He looked stung, then disappointed, then patient, as if I were making a simple matter ugly. He said, "I'm trying to preserve everyone's dignity, everyone's, as though dignity were a group project, and I had failed to bring my portion." I thought about my mother, who had already started calling relatives to explain that the wedding was off. I thought about his father, who once told me over grilled fish that character is who you are when nobody is keeping score. I thought about the friend who had lent him money without knowing I existed. I thought about how many people had trusted the version of him I had been helping display. And I realized this was not about avoiding cruelty. It was about continuity. He wanted to walk back into our shared world with minimal reputational damage. He wanted language that would not follow him. He wanted me to help convert betrayal into mutual drift. He wanted a cleaner archive. There is a particular insult in being asked to co-author your own confusion. Because if I agreed, I would not only be hiding facts, I would be participating in a story that subtly redefined my instincts as excess. The wedding did not end because he concealed debts and lied about his past. No, according to the version he preferred, it ended because life is complicated, love is hard, people change. That version would protect him, yes, but it would also require me to betray the part of myself that had finally become clear. I told him I was not interested in humiliating him. I was not planning speeches. I was not posting timelines online. I was not forwarding screenshots to cousins for recreational outrage. But I would not lie. And I would not repeat a euphemism carefully designed to make his choices disappear. If my family asked, I said, I will tell them the engagement ended because I learned things that made me unable to trust you. If they ask for specifics, I will decide in the moment what belongs to me to share. But I am not going to stand there and call this ordinary incompatibility. It wasn't. His jaw tightened. He looked past me for a moment, out toward the dark river, as if maybe a better audience would present itself outside. Then he said the line that finally burned away whatever tenderness I still carried for his embarrassment. He said, "So you're going to punish me forever." Punish. Not, "So you're still hurt." Not, "I understand why trust is gone." Not, "I hate that I did this." Punish. The language of a man who experiences accountability as cruelty. I felt something close, not inside the relationship, which was already over, but inside my guilt. A door shut. Cleanly, I said. Number, I'm refusing an assignment. He frowned. I think he expected tears or anger or one last chance for him to look like the reasonable one. What he got instead was my calm, and calm makes some people desperate because it cannot be argued with as easily. I picked up my bag, left my key on the table, and told him, "You can survive being known accurately." Then I walked out. For the next week, our families reacted in ways that taught me more about truth than the relationship had. My mother, who loves peace so deeply, she sometimes mistakes it for virtue, asked if it might be better not to give relatives too much. She was afraid of spectacle, afraid of the kind of family retelling that hardens into entertainment. She did not want me reduced to a story people pass between potato salad and dessert. She was not wrong. That concern mattered. And because it mattered, I listened. My father had a different instinct. He said if the truth embarrasses him, he should have thought of that earlier, which felt satisfying and also too blunt. I did not want my hurt converted into a public execution. My older cousin, divorced and sharper than both of them, said the most useful thing. She said, "You don't owe people every detail, but you do owe yourself language that doesn't betray your own memory." I wrote that down. I still have it. Because that was the balance, wasn't it? Not secrecy versus revenge. Not silence versus spectacle. The real choice was whether I would edit my experience into something gentler for the comfort of the person who authored it. So I developed a sentence, not a script, a boundary. The engagement ended because I learned he had hidden serious financial and personal truths from me, and once trust broke, I could not move forward. That was all. No dramatic flourishes, no itemized list, no courtroom voice, just accuracy with a locked door around it. Some people respected it immediately. Some tried to pry. A few looked disappointed, as if heartbreak is only worth hearing when there is better gossip in it. That taught me something too. Curiosity and care are not the same appetite. Julian did not take my boundary well. He sent one last message saying he hoped I would not let anger turn me into someone vindictive. Even then, he needed the record to show that if I spoke plainly, it was because I had become harsh, not because he had become knowable. I did not answer. Months have passed now. The gifts were returned where they could be. The rest were donated, kept, or quietly absorbed into ordinary life. My aunt took back the mixer. My cousin insisted I keep the flutes. My mother moved the hall closet boxes, without announcing it. A mercy I did not ask for, but noticed. Sometimes people still say, "I'm sorry things didn't work out," in the vague social language reserved for endings no one wants to inspect. And sometimes I let that stand. Not every moment needs correction. Not every room deserves the interior map. But when someone I love asks honestly, I answer honestly. Not cruelly. Not theatrically. Just honestly. Because I learned something I wish more women were taught earlier. There are people who will hurt you once, and then hurt you again by asking you to become the curator of their innocence. They will call it grace. They will call it maturity. They will call it keeping things classy, protecting privacy, avoiding drama, choosing the higher road. And sometimes, parts of those words are even true. Privacy matters. Restraint matters. Dignity matters. But dignity is not the same as erasure. And class is not the same as dishonesty. And the higher road, if it requires you to abandon your own witness, is just another road that leads back to them. I do not tell this story because I enjoy what happened. I tell it because I almost missed what the final request really meant. When he asked me to say we had simply grown apart, he was not asking for mercy. He was asking for authorship. He wanted the last clean sentence, the respectable ending, the one where no specific choice could be traced back to him. And maybe that is what still haunts me most. Not that he lied, though he did, not that he hid, though he did that too, but that even after the truth broke open, he still believed my role was to make it easier to look at. If you are in something like this now, if your private alarm keeps getting softened by someone else's polished language, listen carefully. Anyone who consistently edits reality in the direction of their own comfort is not confused. They are recruiting. And if the day comes when you finally step out, remember this. You do not owe the person who deceived you an elegant lie just because it would make the room easier. You are allowed to be measured. You are allowed to be discreet. You are allowed to keep certain details inside the walls of your own life. But you are also allowed not to carry their version of the ending. That was the gift I gave myself, though it did not feel like a gift at first. Not revenge, not exposure, not spectacle. Just the refusal to wear language that had been tailored for my silence. And in the months after, when the shame that did not belong to me finally began to loosen, I understood something simple and permanent. The relationship did not end when I took off the ring. It ended when I stopped volunteering as the witness for his defense.
Thank you for watching. If this story pulled you in, do me one favor. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so the next one finds you the moment it drops. Remember, nothing is ever just what it seems. See you on the next one.